So thank you very much for coming out for this event tonight. This is for the remember and commemoration of the Hiroshima and Nagasaki's atomic bomb attack, and this is very important for all of us here. Not only here and gathering here, but also any of people in the world have to remember that how awful attack was, and how easy to destroy people and this civilization. Um, I just also wants to remind people that atomic bomb and nuclear weapons are very important to be banned in the future, and then that's something that we have to aim for. But at the same time, although even if the nuclear weapons are banned, there are other ways to still kill a lot of people in a day or night. The reason why I brought up this is that because I'm from Tokyo, and in Tokyo had a Tokyo bombings, which is in the history that was the worst warfare, the attack in history. This is something that my elder friends from my high school alumni and also my great-grandparents and grandparents told me that if you're going outside of Japan, you have to tell people that what happened in Tokyo too, because people only focusing on just one weapon that threatening people's life, but also there's a lot of other way to do the same thing. Of course, needs more effort to do it, but like a Tokyo experience was the over 279 Boeing 29 Super Fortress came over to Tokyo and then dropped a lot of the bombs, incendiary bomb, over 1,600 tons of incendiary bomb, and then killed 97,000 people and 125,000 people wounded, just 5 hours. So the Hiroshima was the more significantly scary thing, because American needed to, in order to kill 100,000 people, American needed 279 Boeing 29, B-29 in Tokyo, and then in Hiroshima, about the same number of people. They used only 2 Boeing B-29. One is for just to go through the fly over the Hiroshima and then see how the city is going. And then that was one of a trick for the Japanese defense force, that they alerted people once for that fake bomber, and then after the real one came, the defense force misled it. That's also the fake bomb. So they didn't actually alert people for the air raid. So that caused more people to receive the attack in bare skin. So that's the one thing that we really have to remember, and I really want people to understand and remember. And then I can see a lot of elder people here, and also a lot of young generation too. Actually, I brought my 7 weeks old boy as well. So of course they don't remember, but it's, the next year maybe, or after, year after. Important thing is to pass on the message from the victims to the next generation to avoid the situation of the war. That's the most important message that I want you to bring home. So I'm gonna go to the next thing, which is the speech, the mayor's speech. Every year, the city of Hiroshima, mayor of the city of Hiroshima makes a speech. It's a peace declaration, and then I would like to read it. And it's going to be a little bit long, but it's a different story, I think. So I'm going to read it here. The City of Hiroshima Peace Declaration, August 6, 2019. Around the world today, we see self-centered nationalism in ascendance. Tensions heightened by international exclusively and rivalry with nuclear disarmament at stand still. What are we to make of these global phenomena? Having undergone 2 world wars, our elders pursued an ideal, a world beyond war. They undertook to construct a system of international cooperation. Should we not now recall and, for human survival, strive for that ideal world? I ask especially of you, the youth who have never known war but will lead the future. For this purpose, I ask you to listen carefully to the Hibakusha of August 6, 1945. A woman who was 5 then has written this poem. Little sister with a bowl cut, head spraying blood, embraced by mother, turned raging Asura. A youth of 18 saw this. They were nearly naked, their clothes burned to tatters, but I couldn't tell the men from women. Hair gone, eyeballs popped out, lips and ears ripped off, skin hanging from faces, bodies covered in blood, and so many. Today, he insists, we must never, ever allow this to happen to any future generation. We are enough. Appeals like these come from survivors who carry deep scars in body and soul. Are they reaching you? A single person is small and weak, but if each of us seeks peace, I'm sure we can stop the forces pushing for war. This woman was 15 at the time. Can we allow her face to end up an empty wish? Turning to the world, we do see that individuals have little power, but we also see many examples of the combined strengths of multitudes achieving their goal. Indian independence is one such example. Mahatma Gandhi, who contributed to that independence through personal pain and suffering, left us these words: intolerance is itself a form of violence and an obstacle to the growth of a true democratic spirit. To confront our current circumstances and achieve a peaceful, sustainable world, we must transcend differences of status or opinion and strive together in a spirit of tolerance toward our ideal. To accomplish this, coming generations must never dismiss the atomic bombs and the war as mere events of the past. This is vital that they internalize the progress the Hibakusha and others have made toward a peaceful world, then drive steadfastly forward. World leaders must move forward with them, advising civil society's ideal. This is why I urge them to visit the atomic bomb cities, listen to the hibakusha, and tour the Peace Memorial Museum and the National Peace Memorial Hall to face what actually happened in the lives of individual victims and their loved ones. I want our current leaders to remember their courageous predecessors when nuclear superpowers, the US and USSR, were engaged in the tense, escalating nuclear arms race. Their leaders manifested reason and turned to dialogue to seek disarmament. This city, along with the nearly 7,800 member cities of Mayor for Peace, is spreading the spirit of Hiroshima throughout civil society to create an environment supportive of leaders taking action for nuclear abolition. We want leaders around the world to pursue negotiations in good faith on nuclear disarmament, as mandated by Article 6 of the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty, and respond to the yearning of civil society for entry into force of the treaty on the prohibition of nuclear weapons. A milestone on the road to a nuclear weapon-free world. I can call on the government of the only country to experience a nuclear weapon in a war to accede to the hibakusha's request that the TPNW be signed and ratified. I urge Japan's leader to manifest the pacifism of the Japanese constitution by displaying leadership in taking the next step towards our world free from nuclear weapons. Furthermore, I demand policies that expand the black rain areas and improve assistance to a hibakusha whose average age exceeds 82, as well as the many others whose minds, bodies, and daily lives are still plagued by suffering due to the harmful effect of radiation. Today at this Peace Memorial ceremony commemorating 74 years since the atomic bombing, we offer our heartfelt consolation to the soul of the atomic bomb victims, and in concert with the city of Nagasaki and kindred spirits around the world, we pledge to make every effort to achieve the total elimination of nuclear weapons, and beyond that, a world of genuine, lasting peace. Matsui Kazumi, Mayor, the City of Hiroshima. I apologize, my some of the readings was a little bit glitching. Forgive me, this is my second language. Okay, so next program is the Black Rain. The Candice Summer, she would like to introduce some of story from the Black Rain. Please come over here and.
Hi, so I'm just going to do a brief reading from Black Rain by Masuji Abus. Now, this book is drawn from actual records and interviews. It has been called a documentary novel. And the narrative flow of the book describes the moment that the bomb was dropped on Hiroshima through different people's perspectives, as well as its aftermath. Of course, this was 74 years ago today, August 6, 1945, and the characters are based on real people. So from the introduction to the book by John Bester, Black Rain is a portrait of a group of human beings, of the death of a great city, of a nation crumbling into defeat. Dealing with the grimmest of subjects, the work is not in the end depressing, for the author is ultimately concerned with life rather than death, and with an overall beauty that transcends ugliness of detail. And now I'll just read you a passage here. So this is after the bomb has dropped, and we're just hearing the main characters, one of the main characters' reactions to it. So, the mushroom cloud was really shaped more like a jellyfish than a mushroom. Yet it seemed to have a more animal vitality than any jellyfish. With its leg that quivered and its head that changed color as it sprawled out slowly toward the southeast, writhing and raging as though it might hurl itself on our heads at any moment. It was an envoy of the devil himself, I decided. Who else in the whole wide universe would have presumed to summon forth such a monstrosity? Should I ever get away alive? Would my family survive? Was I indeed on my way home to rescue them? Or was I seeking refuge for myself alone? My legs were so unsteady that I could not put one foot before the other, and I shivered uncontrollably. With a mighty effort, I forced myself to get a grip on myself. Catching sight of a stick of the kind used for hulling ration rice that was lying by the tracks, heaven knows where it had been blown from, I beat myself indiscriminately on the calves, buttocks, and thighs. Next, I beat my shoulders and upper arms. Then I shut my eyes and did some deep breathing. I did it by the method we were always made to follow in morning exercises at the factory, breathing in and out very slowly in almost incantatory fashion. It gave me back control of my legs, as well as a certain mental detachment, and I set off eastward along the tracks. Although everything in me told me to hurry, I adjusted my pace as to not overtake other refugees. Since this was not one of those nightmares where one is held back by invisible forces, I probably could have run if I had wished, but a feeling that it was best to leave everything in the lap of the gods held me in check. Suddenly, one of a group of refugees who was just then overtaking me cried out, "Parachute, parachute," and broke into a run. Then, just as suddenly, he reverted to the same plodding, lifeless gait as before. It was a parachute, no doubt. Ahead of us and to the left, a clump of white clouds floated over the farthest hills, and way up in the sky above the clouds was a single white parachute, drifting gently toward the north. I was walking on, still worrying about it vaguely, when there was a sudden loud boom. The ground shook and a column of black smoke rose up 700 or 800 yards to the northwest. As one man, the refugees on the tracks began to run, but almost at once reverted to their former leaden tread, the tread of men utterly exhausted both physically and mentally. Then another explosion and another. With earth-shaking roars, columns of black smoke shot up a full 300 feet. At each explosion, the refugees began to run. Finally, someone called out, "It's oil drums going up, oil drums!" And their pace became even more lethargic than before. No one made any verbal response to the voice. When I got to the near side of the Yokogawa railway bridge, I found over 2,000 refugees squatting on the grass embankment below. Almost no one except the young made any move to cross. The bridge must have been more than 100 feet up, and a glimpse of the river below was enough to make one's limbs go weak. Even so, it was the only way to get to the other side. The people squatting there, almost all of whom were injured, seemed to be in a state of apathy, without even the will to get across. Some of them simply sat in silence, gazing at one fixed spot in the sky. Most of them, however, kept their eyes averted from the mushroom cloud. Quite a few of the injured lay sprawled on their backs on the bank. The one exception was a woman who held her arms stretched out toward the cloud and kept screaming in a shrill voice, "Hey, you monster of a cloud, go away. We're non-belligerents. Do you hear? Go away." Oddly, for one who seemed so lively, she made no attempt to cross the bridge. Suddenly, I could no longer bear waiting about indecisively. I made up my mind. I would cross the bridge. I set off in the wake of a young man who was bleeding from the shoulder, avoiding as far as possible looking at the waters below. About 9/10 of the way across, passage was blocked by the freight train lying on its side. After much difficulty, I succeeded in getting past by crawling flat on my face. About halfway along the train, where the river below was shallow, I spied a mass of onions that had tipped out and lay in heaps below. The refugees had got over the bridge, were going up the hill from Futabe no Sato in a long procession as though being steadily sucked up toward the higher parts. In 2 or 3 places, higher up on the hillside, forest fires were visible. It seemed that only those who lived in the hills themselves realized the very special horror of hill fires. To live in droves in the direction of a hill fire reminded me of terrible moths dashing themselves against a lamp at night. I myself knew the fearful danger of hill fires from having seen them when I was a child. I remembered, too, how many victims they had claimed. I said to a group of 4 or 5 refugees as they went past, "Hill fires are dangerous. They may look small, especially in the daytime, but they're really quite large and cover a large area. The flames roar downwards, and red-hot stones and rocks come rolling down. But they went up the hill without seeming to heed." Eventually, I came out at the corner of the West Parade Ground. Here there seemed to be refugees as far as the eye could see, and the whole great expanse was swamped beneath a sea of humanity. Yet here, too, the fleeing crowds were pressing on with one idea of getting to the hills. I remembered what I had heard of tidal waves, how they ooze on in muddy swirls, one up to the higher ground below. In accordance with my plan of getting first to Hiroshima Station, I walked along the edge of the parade ground, cutting diagonally across the flow of people going to the hills. Need I say how varied in appearance and condition were the hundreds, the thousands of people I saw on the way? I felt compelled, unnecessary though it may be, to set down here some of the memories of them, just as they come back to my mind today. The countless people who had blackish, dried blood clinging to them, where it flowed from their faces onto their shoulders and down their backs, or over their chests and down their bellies. Some were still bleeding, but they seemed to have no energy to do anything about it. The people staggering along in whatever direction the crowd carried them, their arms dangling purposely by their sides. The people who walked with their eyes shut, swaying to and fro as they were pushed by the crowd. The woman leading a child by the hand, who realized that the child was not hers, shook her hand free with a cry and ran off. And the child, a boy of 6 or 7, running, crying plaintively after her. The father leading his child by the hand, who lost hold of him in the crush, he pushed through the crowd, calling the child's name over and over, till finally he was struck brutally and repeatedly by someone he had thrust out of the way. A middle-aged man carrying an old man on his back, a man carrying a young girl, an invalid I should say, and his daughter on his back, a woman with her belongings and a child loaded on a baby carriage who was engulfed in a sudden wave of humanity that crushed the baby carriage and felled her on top of it, so that 20 or 30 others coming behind her toppled like dominoes in their turn. The cries at that moment had to be heard to be believed. A man who carried, held like an offering before him, a clock that emitted a dull, broken noise as he walked. A man who carried over his shoulder a fish basket attached to the cloth case of a fishing rod. A barefooted woman, shading her eyes with both hands, who sobbed helplessly as she walked. An elderly man half supporting above the waist, half dragging, a woman whose face, arms, and chest were covered with blood. At each step the woman's head lolled heavily backwards and forwards, or from side to side. Both looked as though they might expire at any moment, but they were jostled mercilessly by the throng. A young woman who came along almost naked, with a naked baby, its face almost entirely covered with blood, strapped to her back, facing to the rear instead of the normal way. A man whose legs were moving busily as though he were running, but who was so wedged in the wave of humanity that he achieved little more than a rapid mark time.
Thank you, Candace. And so we have few people to introduce. The next one is the some of a story from the actual the experience survivor of the atomic bomb. The Norma will introduce some of the words from the story of the Hibakshas. Come here, please.
Hello. I'd like to talk about the survivors of the A-bomb blast in Hiroshima. I was 9 years old and living in Winnipeg at the time of the bomb. And the radio was always on and the adults were always talking. So I heard a lot about the attack. And I was very frightened, and I imagined that an A-bomb could be dropped on Winnipeg. When I thought about this, I imagined that if a bomb was dropped in Winnipeg, it would destroy every structure and every human being, and there would be absolutely nothing left. In my 9-year-old mind, I never thought there would be survivors. I didn't give a thought to that for quite a few years, and then much later, I visited Japan, and I spent the day with friends whose relatives had been killed in the blast. And I also visited the Peace Museum, where I purchased this book. It is the eyewitness testimonies from A-bomb survivors. And the book contains stories of 15 of the survivors of the Hiroshima blast. Each one is about 4 pages long, and I can only give you an excerpt from one of them due to time. And this is an account by Setsuko Iwamoto. And what she says is, I was 13 and a second-year student at a girls' high school. I was exposed to the A-bomb explosion in our wooden school building. At the time, with a shortage of labor due to war, school children were recruited to work on clearing fire roads and working in factories and other places. So just before I left my school building to go to work, I was struck by a powerful blue flash. I found myself trapped under the wooden school building, and I knew there could be a fire. Somehow I escaped, and when I stood on flat ground, none of the trees or buildings that had been there before could be seen. I was engulfed in an eerie silence, and for an instant I thought I might be the only living thing on earth, and I will never ever forget that feeling. Soon I was brought to myself by cries and shouts. The people around me were burned black, with skin sliding off their arms and faces. We couldn't recognize each other and had to guess each other's names. Our teacher was badly burned and couldn't move, but she yelled for us to run for Hijaya Hill. Many died, but I was found by my parents, who repaired my skin over time with folk medicines. The vast majority of students in my class died on August 6th or shortly thereafter. Many survivors eventually died from the after effects of the radiation. At the time, they just called it the A-bomb disease. It caused people to have purple rashes all over their body, bloody diarrhea, vomiting, and great pain, eventually leading to death. I saw misery that day I could not believe was of this world. The voices of those war victims will never be heard. As a survivor, it is my mission to speak on their behalf and tell their story to the next generation. So I don't know whether Setsuko Iwamoto is still alive, but I do know that in her 70s, she was still visiting schools in Japan and talking to students about Hiroshima and Nagasaki. I wish there were more time to read you more of these amazing stories of everyday people who survived this horrific hell on earth. All of them wanted the world to know their stories so that it would never happen again. So every year, this Lanterns for Peace ceremony helps that happen. I'd like to close with a quote from this book that you all have probably heard many times, but it is that humankind and nuclear weapons cannot coexist indefinitely. Thank you for coming.
Thank you very much, Noma. She made a really good point actually. When she was child, you know, the Winnipeg, if Winnipeg got attacked by the atomic bomb, she felt really fear, because Hiroshima and Nagasaki aren't the most populated area in Japan. There's a lot of other cities more populated than Hiroshima and Nagasaki. There's a fact that actually the Curtis LeMay signed off for 12 different cities to drop the atomic bomb after Hiroshima in Japan. So it's actually good to actually visualize if you were there and how do you feel. So anyways, the next is the story of a Sadako. I assigned one of the Japanese newcomer to, well, I'm not sure if I should call newcomer, but she moved to Winnipeg from Nagasaki, and her father was in Nagasaki too, and she is going to read about the story of Sadako. Her name is Junko. Please come up here, and thank you very much.
Good evening, everybody. As I was introduced, Junko Bailey. I'm from Japan, originally from Nagasaki. I came here in '98, in my early 20s, and I'm married to a guy from Winnipeg, and I have these beautiful 2 children who's running around, making noises. Sorry about this. So I'd like to read a story of Sadako Sasaki. Sadako at age 12. Sadako was 2 years old when the atomic bomb was dropped on Hiroshima. She was 2 kilometers away from where the bomb exploded. Most of Sadako's neighbors died, but Sadako wasn't injured at all, at least not in any way people could see. Up until the time Sadako was in the 7th grade in 1955, she was a normal, happy girl. However, one day after an important relay race that she helped her team win, she felt extremely tired and dizzy. After a while, the dizziness went away, leaving Sadako to think that it was only the exertion from the race, that made her tired and dizzy. But her tranquility did not last. Soon after her first encounter with extreme fatigue and dizziness, she experienced more incidents of the same. One day, Sadako became so dizzy that she fell down and couldn't get up. Her schoolmates informed the teacher. Later, Sadako's parents took her to the Red Cross hospital to see what was wrong with her. Sadako found out that she had leukemia, a kind of blood cancer. Nobody could believe it. At the time, they called leukemia a A-bomb disease. Almost everybody who got this disease died. And Sadako was very scared. She wanted to go back to school, but she had to stay in the hospital where she cried and cried. Shortly thereafter, her best friend Chizuko came to visit her. Chizuko brought some origami, folding paper. She told Sadako of a legend. She explained that the crane, a sacred bird in Japan, lives for 100 years. And if a sick person folds 1,000 paper cranes, then that person would soon get well. After hearing that legend, Sadako decided to fold 1,000 cranes in the hope that she would get well again soon. Sadako's family worried about her a lot. They often came to visit her in the hospital to talk to her and to help her fold cranes. After she folded 500 cranes, she felt better, and the doctor said she could go home for a short time, but by the end of the first week back home, the dizziness and fatigue returned, and she had to go back to the hospital. Sadako kept folding cranes even though she was in great pain. Even during this time of great pain, she tried to be cheerful and hopeful. Not long afterwards, with her family standing by her bed, Sadako went to sleep peacefully, never to wake up again. She had folded a total of 644 paper cranes. Everyone was very sad. 39 of Sadako's classmates felt saddened by the loss of their close friend and decided to form a paper crane club to honor her. Word spread quickly. Students from 3,100 schools and from 9 foreign countries gave money to the cause. On May 5th, 1958, almost 3 years after Sadako died, enough money was collected to build a monument in her honor. It is now known as the Children's Peace Monument, and it is located in the center of Hiroshima Peace Park, close to the spot where the atomic bomb was dropped. Many of the children who helped make the Children's Monument a reality participated in the ceremony. These students, including Sadako's younger brother, Eiji Sasaki, pulled the red and white tape off the statue to symbolize its completion, while Beethoven's 7th Symphony was played. The little bell, contributed by Dr. Yukawa, inscribed with 1,000 paper cranes on the front, and peace on earth and in heaven on the back, rang out. The sound carried as far as the A-bomb dome and the memorial canotop. Adults who supported the group later formed the Paper Crane Club in June. The original Paper Crane Club disbanded in 1997. Children from all over the world still send folded paper cranes to place beneath Sadako's statue. In doing so, they make the same wish which is engraved on the base of the statue. This is our cry, this is our prayer, peace in the world. Thank you.
Thank you, Junko. And the next is the Ellen will make the update of the nuclear weapons disarmament.
I was asked to say a few words tonight to connect the events of 74 years ago with what we are facing today in terms of nuclear war and nuclear disarmament. So we're here again to remember and to honor all who lost their lives in Hiroshima and Nagasaki 74 years ago. And we're here to listen to the voices of those who survived and who've rebuilt their cities and communities and dedicated these to their memories, to peace, and to nuclear disarmament as embodied in Japan's pacifist constitution. As we think about the Mayor of Hiroshima's peace declaration of this year, we're reminded that we still live in a world that has been forever changed by the creation and use of nuclear weapons against civilian populations on the verge of developing war, far away, as an experiment in the use of 2 different kinds of nuclear weapons on living populations. This threat is not gone, and the Mayor of Hiroshima has again reminded us of the urgency of this matter and called for Japan to sign the Treaty for the Abolition of Nuclear Weapons, the Ban Treaty as we call it, and we can also call on Canada to do this. As we have been reading in the newspapers or watching on the media in the last few days, we've been told that we're facing a renewed nuclear arms race. So I'd like to, I was asked to talk about what the state of nuclear disarmament is at the present point in time, and I'll go through this fairly briefly. The most important thing I think for us to remember is that the world has succeeded in preventing the further use of nuclear weapons in war for 74 years. This is not a small achievement. In fact, it's incredibly impressive. And I think that we want to keep this in mind as we think about the very difficult things that we are commemorating today. We need to remember that we've built and continue to have a powerful movement for nuclear disarmament that is supported by the majority of the nations of the world and that is continuing to develop new international tools of law and of popular movement to achieve the total elimination of nuclear weapons. But there are certainly reasons for concern, and some of the important tools that have been created to restrict nuclear proliferation and the stockpiling of enormous numbers of nuclear weapons are faltering with the state of the current world order. First of all, I might mention the one that has come to our attention most recently, which is the Intermediate Range Nuclear Forces Treaty that has just ended. It was an arrangement between the United States and Russia created in the days of the Cold War to limit the use of nuclear weapons, nuclear missiles, nuclear weaponized missiles that could reach ranges of 500 to 5,500 kilometers, which was a terrible threat at the time, and some of us of my age will remember the nuclear disarmament movement of the 1980s, the threat of cruise missiles in Europe. This was an important achievement at the time, and we might think that possibly it's less needed now, although we've also just been reminded that as this treaty has been abandoned, people are thinking now of using land-based nuclear missiles in Northeast Asia. So this reminds us of the importance of these specific tools for giving us some degree of protection in the contemporary world. There are two other important achievements that have given us some degree of protection in recent years that we're going to be hearing more about in the next little while. The New START agreement is one between the United States and Russia that has limited the arsenals of these two countries that have most of the nuclear weapons in the world. And this treaty is due to expire in 2021. The treaty limited the long-range nuclear arsenals of both these countries, and it is the only remaining legal instrument that holds back the United States and Russia from expanding their arsenals. We should be very worried about what's going to happen to this in 2021. This spring we also had another indication, which is that the Non-Proliferation Treaty, which is another very important vehicle, which was created to try to prevent nuclear weapons from spreading to additional countries, is going through or entering on a period of review. And there have been a series of meetings on this. The meeting that was held this spring, which normally produces an agreed document at the end of its meetings, was unable to come to any agreement. The agreement would have required consensus, and 3 countries opposed the consensus, which were the United States, the United Kingdom, and Canada. So this basically is causing a great deal of concern in terms of what kind of framework we have for restricting the behavior of states and the danger that they're posing in terms of nuclear war. There is a positive sign on the horizon as well, which of course is the treaty for the prohibition of nuclear weapons. It is the major initiative that has been undertaken in recent years. It's an incredibly important one. It's one we've celebrated at the Lantern Festival for the last couple of years. It is an important initiative that has been overwhelmingly supported by the non-nuclear states of the world. The global south, as we might call it, is perhaps coming to our rescue on this. It was opened for signing in September 2017. The process by which it will become international, an international treaty that's in effect requires 50 ratifications. At this moment, it's 50 signatures, of which 24 is ratification, 22 more are somewhere in that process right now. We can quite optimistically say that fairly soon this treaty will come into effect. We can't give an exact date for it, but the prospects are extremely good. The problem, of course, is that the signatories are all countries that do not have nuclear weapons. And this was a new approach to trying to mobilize the world in opposition, because the states that had nuclear weapons were in effect not meeting their obligations. This treaty marked a successful new strategy for working with non-nuclear states, but the nuclear states and their allies are not signing on and are rejecting this. And this includes Canada. So one of the things that we might want to look at is what else we can do, and also look at popular movements for change. And there are some of those that are somewhat encouraging, although we have to be vigilant and supportive of these popular movements wherever they're occurring. One of the most significant recently has been in the popular movement for nuclear disarmament in South Korea, that has managed to break through to having a president who was able to open negotiations with North Korea. And while we are still constantly being worried in the news about this, the situation is in fact much safer than it was a couple years ago, when it was really on the brink of a serious nuclearization of Northeast Asia and possibly something quite catastrophic. So we have had a dangerous situation in Northeast Asia, has been at least put on hold, and we want to continue to watch this and to support the people of South and North Korea as they try to break through the pressures that are being put on them from elsewhere. What I might also mention is the importance of other multi-party agreements. And one of these would be the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action, or what's simply called the Iran deal, which has managed to hold back the nuclear weaponization of the Middle East for a number of years. And this was a matter of a number of countries managing to come together and persuade Iran to accept an arrangement that gave it certain kinds of protections in return for not pursuing nuclear weapons. As we know in the news, this of course is also a great concern at present because of the decision of the United States to pull out of this agreement, to apply sanctions. This has created all kinds of additional attention and problems in the Middle East at the moment. So we need to watch all of this and to understand the importance of coming together in all of these activities. And one of the important things to remember is the enormous capacity that the nuclear disarmament movement has had. Because what we're being told in some sense right now is that a nuclear arms race is restarting. In fact, it restarted in 2012. And what happened is that the peace movement noticed and responded immediately. This is how we have come to have the movement towards a treaty for the prohibition of nuclear weapons. The signs were read immediately. There was an important response. And one of the things that we can do now is to support and call for Canada, and of course to support the people of Japan as well, in their call for Japan to join and sign the treaty for the prohibition of nuclear weapons. There's no legal obstacle in the Non-Proliferation Treaty or in NATO or in any legal framework anywhere for a country to sign on to this. They're simply being subjected to pressures from the nuclear powers not to do so. But we want to remember that since 1984, Canada has not had nuclear weapons permanently based in Canada. This was a political decision that we were capable of making then. We are capable of making independent decisions now, and it is time that we can think about that. And I would like to end with the words of Setsuko Thurlow, when she was accepting on behalf of ICANN the 2017 Nobel Peace Prize for their work on the Treaty for the Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons. What she said is, "This is the beginning of the end of nuclear weapons. Let it be so, and let us work to make it so."
Thank you, Ellen. So, so this is the basically the end of the program. So we're gonna move on to the launch of lanterns that we created there.